There are people who do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God, who are poor in spirit, who are the meek, the merciful, the peacemakers, and who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. This morning, I would like to celebrate some of them by celebrating their words. I invite you to imagine them joining us here and listening to them sharing with us. They are people who, if you went to visit them in their neighborhood and you noticed that the neighborhood there was a lot of violence and you said, you know, you need to use force here. There are people who would ask you, which force are you talking about? The force of the gun or the force of love that people like Martin Luther King talked about? First reading is from Miguel Descato, Nicaraguan priest. I don't believe that nonviolence is something you can arrive at rationally. We can develop it as a spirituality and can obtain the grace necessary to practice it, but not as a result of reason. Not that it is anti-reason, but that it's not natural. The natural thing to do when somebody hits you is to hit them back. We are called upon to be supernatural. We reach that way of being not as a result of nature, but of prayer. I have come to believe that creative nonviolence has to be a constitutive element of evangelization and of the proclamation of the gospel. In Nicaragua, the cancer of oppression and injustice and crime and exploitation was allowed to grow. And finally, the people had to fight with the means available to them, the only means that people have found from of old, armed struggle. The church arrogantly said violence was bad, nonviolence was the correct way. But that spirituality and work with people's consciences had never been done. We have no right to hope to harvest what we have not sown. From Domingos Barbe, Brazilian theologian. While the Christian understanding of liberation definitely includes the political dimension, it also goes much further. After all, the Christian understanding is that the root of evil runs deeper than politics. It lies in the human soul. The Spirit of God fills all that it touches with joy. We do not live by bread alone. To be happy, we need bread and love. From Naim Stefan Atik, Palestinian activist. God's justice cannot be separated from God's peace and love and mercy. There is a sense in which blind, impersonal, and exacting justice can easily become injustice. Love your enemies. Christians know how difficult these words are, but they are fully cognizant that the words of Jesus reflect the genuinely human, and they should remain for them the standard of the truly authentic life. So often it is those who have suffered most at the hands of others who are capable of offering forgiveness and love. To keep struggling against hate and to practice forgiveness need not mean abdicating one's rights and renouncing justice. Christians should stand on these principles and insist that justice must be done. They should never give up their rights, but neither should they give in to hate. Maintain your inner freedom. Insist on justice. Work for it, and it shall be yours. Now, the next person to come up and share with us is from Adolfo Perez Esquivel, Argentinian activist. We struggle by rendering operative the force of love in the battle of liberation. Active nonviolence is a response that is based on gospel. Nonviolence is a way of answering evil and injustice with truth, and hate with love. For truth and love are the weapons of the Spirit in the face of repression. Nonviolence is not passivity or conformism. It is a spirit and a method. It is a spirit of prophecy, for it denounces all sundering of a community of brothers and sisters and proclaims that this community can only be rebuilt through love. And it is a method, an organized set of ruptures in the civil order so as to disturb the system responsible for the injustices we see around us. Here we see the power for the dispossessed, the weapon of the poor. Here is participation indeed. Here is no elitist contest, no partisan struggle. The means will include boycotts, strikes, non-cooperation, civil disobedience, hunger strikes, and many other actions. No one will liberate another. We have to find liberation together. We refer to a liberation in which we participate and are ourselves whole. We try to transmit this view of liberation. Next comes up Chief Albert Lutuli of South Africa. The laws and conditions which tend to degrade the human person must be implacably opposed in the spirit of defiance demonstrated by Peter when he said to the leader of his time, "Shall we obey God or humans?" From Archbishop Oscar Romero, El Salvador. I want to make a special appeal to soldiers, National Guardsmen, and policemen. Brothers, each one of you is one of us. We are the same people. The campesinos you kill are your own brothers and your own sisters. When you hear the words of a man telling you to kill, remember instead the words of God, "Thou shalt not kill." God's law must prevail. No soldier is obliged to obey an order contrary to the law of God. I am obliged to give my life for those I love, for the entire Salvadoran people, including those Salvadorans who threaten to assassinate me. Next comes up Sister Ita Ford in El Salvador. Can I say to my neighbor, I have no solution to this situation. I don't know the answers. but I will walk with you, search with you, be with you. From Jean Donovan, El Salvador. People in our positions really have to die unto ourselves and our wealth to gain the spirituality of the poor and oppressed. It's so much harder to fight for your liberty in a nonviolent way than it is with a gun. It's funny, people very close to me have been killed, and yet I still think that. So I'm starting to think maybe I really do believe it. At the moment, the only nonviolent voice in the whole country is the church. What if we could say that about Canada? From Bishop Desmond Tutu, South Africa. I like life and would like to be alive when the day of liberation dawns. But I am also aware that in a liberation struggle, you have casualties. From Dom Helder Camara, Brazilian bishop. I respect and will always respect those who, after serious and sincere reflection, have opted for violence. Personally, I have always said that I would prefer to be killed 1,000 times rather than to kill. I believe in the force of the nonviolent moral pressure, which is the violence of the pacifist. You are well aware, my brothers and sisters, that we are sufficiently feeble to trigger off the third and final world war. You know as well that we are sufficiently strong to wipe away from the same earth evermore its misery. Next comes Alan Bozak, South Africa. I do not need battle dress or weapons, for the God of justice is with me. Violence destroys something in you. There's an element of uncontrollability in it. The people who say violence will solve all problems, I think that is romantic, that by grabbing the gun and eliminating the enemy, you solve the problem. From General Jacques de Bollardière from France. After 30 years of active warfare, World War II, Algeria, and Vietnam, he completely renounced the institution of war itself and committed himself to nonviolence. Quote, "This strategy of nonviolence is accessible to the masses. At its worst, this struggle without arms and without hatred would not provoke the same massacres as violence, would not accumulate the same ruins, would not lower the level of civilization. As an officer, I've constantly asked young men to accept to be killed, and they accepted, often without understanding, simply because they were trained for that. Why would not young people today accept to sacrifice themselves for something that they understand and believe in?" From J.S. Woodsworth, co-founder of Canada's CCF, the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation. Now I should like to challenge the implication that in order that we may become a self-sufficient nation, it is necessary for us to maintain a militia force. Now is the time when we should decide whether or not an armed force means or makes for peace. I recognize that the policy which I have advocated would involve risks, but the present policy involves not only risks, but also certain failure. Why not take those risks which are incident to the development of the new means of protecting our nations? From Franz Jagerstatter. He was an Austrian farmer and father of 3 young girls. In a letter to his wife from a Nazi cell where he was imprisoned for refusing to join Hitler's army. Quote, in a prison, no chains, not even a sentence of death can rob a man of the faith and his own free will. God gives so much strength, a strength far stronger than all the might of the world. The power of God cannot be overcome. And finally, from Dorothy Day, Catholic worker. Love is not starving of whole populations. Love is not the bombardment of open cities. Love is not killing. It is the laying down of one's life. There is nothing that we can do but love. And dear God, please enlarge our hearts to love each other, to love our neighbor, to love our enemy, as well as our friend. We are all called here at Holy Trinity to be people who do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God, who are poor in spirit, merciful, and peacemakers, even if we are persecuted for righteousness' sake. I want to invite us into 2 minutes of silence. If out of the silence you want to share something, please feel free to do so. But I invite you primarily into silence for 2 minutes. Please be at peace with the silence. Don't wait for something to happen. The silence itself is happening. The silence itself is an act of prayer. 2 minutes of silence. Amen.